Hey everybody, welcome back. So I thought today I'd talk a little bit about gaslighting and also gaslighting in terms of how you might feel or how some people might feel listening to my stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about this. I also want to offer some clarification. So you know that I have two platforms. I have my Benzo platform and I have my Screw the Whiffs platform. And I think the Screw the Whiffs platform can be equally as helpful for people going through benzo withdrawal. But there's something I'm talking about that I think is for some people it's maybe tripping a wire a little bit. And I want to go back and talk about this. And it's the idea of, but wait a second, you're saying all of this is just in our head. Nope, I'm not saying that. I'll go back and clarify that. You're saying that chronic fatigue and MS and long-term COVID aren't real conditions. They're all in our heads, but there's real markers for these things. Yes, I'm not saying those are not real conditions. So I'll explain that. I've been hearing, but wait, I'm tapering, and I don't know if I'm tapering too fast and that's why I'm struggling, or if if this is just anxiety, and what's withdrawal and what's anxiety. And now if you're telling me it's all anxiety, then I shouldn't think about how I taper. Nope, not saying that either. So let me go back and kind of start at the beginning and speak about a few of these things. So first of all, when I'm talking about nervous system sensitization in general, not just to the benzo world or the Z-drug world or the antidepressant and antipsychotic world, the medication world, I'm talking about obviously this, again, head to toe, internal and external electrical grid that is misfiring. And you'll hear me say again and again, lots of things can kind of bring us to the dance. Lots of things can affect our nervous system, okay? If you're listening on the Benzo channel, chances are what has brought you to the dance is some sort of med reaction, some sort of complicated withdrawal story, okay? So let me go back to what started this whole thing for me 8 years ago. And that was, I was perfectly fine. I felt fine. I wasn't being treated for any sort of psychiatric condition or any medical condition other than I'd been on a very low dose of thyroid medicine since my 20s. I was 46 years old and, excuse me, and I took 3 doses of Levaquin because I stopped at a doc-in-the-box urgent care and because I thought I had, a little bit of bronchitis or maybe a bad cold, and I didn't want to miss work. I was really busy at the time in my private practice, and I just wanted to catch it before it got too bad. And so I stopped, and they gave me Levaquin. They didn't tell me anything about it. The pharmacist didn't flag it. And I took 3 doses. And within 27 hours, I ended up looking like a completely different person. If you've read my book, The Waiting Room, this is how the book starts. And what I mean by I look like a very different person was suddenly I was unable to regulate my temperature. I couldn't sit still. I had a form of akathisia. At the same time that I couldn't sit still, I had shooting pains. It's like somebody was stabbing me with a fork in my feet and my legs, but still couldn't sit still. I had screeching tinnitus in my ears and couldn't listen to anything. I wore ear plugs even when I went back to work for months. I developed bad insomnia, didn't sleep more than maybe 2, 3, 4 hours a night for 9, 10 months. I developed a tremor in my left arm. I began looking like the whole world. I couldn't see. Everything was in foggy goggles. That did get better. Then it came back. Then it's always been with me on some degree. I lost like 28 pounds or 25 pounds or whatever it was in the month. Didn't have that much weight to lose. I was having horrible gastrointestinal issues. The list goes on and on. I lost my hair. It was horrible. I became terrified to do anything. It was a nightmare. So what happened as a result, and I don't want to spend a lot of time here because I've already done that with the book and talking about this many times before, was I went to, almost 27 or 28 doctor's appointments over the course of 3 months, 8 different specialists ranging from neurologist to cardiologist to gastroenterologist to internist to ENTs. I say endocrinology. You name it, basically I went to it. And I was told over and over again, well, there's no way it was that antibiotic. You only took 3 doses and it's long out of your system. Now, thank God I had still my cognition intact and I was able to say and think like, okay, but while it was in my body, could it have done some damage? Could it have done something while it was in there? No. And I would look at them and think, if I got slammed in the face with a baseball, if I got hit in the head with a baseball, would I have to come in here with a baseball protruding from my head for you to determine or believe that there could be a concussion or a broken nose or a broken bone or some tissue damage in my face? The baseball's gone. It's no longer sticking out of my head. It was never sticking in my head. The baseball's gone. The culprit's gone. But I'm left with this concussion. I'm left with this bruise. I'm left with this black eye. Nobody in their right mind would think, well, if you can't produce the baseball's not hitting your head right now, Jen. The baseball's not hitting your eye. So that can't be it. It was insane. It was pure gaslighting and it was pure insanity. And I know that for many of us, if not most of us, going through benzo withdrawal or medication adverse effects, we're being met with very similar things. Nah, there's no way. These are safe. Well, they're not safe. In fact, the World Health Organization just came out in this past November with stipulations that said benzodiazepines should also not be being used for anxiety disorders. They actually said, it can be used for a very acute crisis lasting no more than a couple of days. That just came out in November. When I had this incident with my Levaquin, there were 5 black box warning about potentially permanent central nervous system damage. Nobody knew about it. Finally, 3 months in, I had an ENT doctor, a new one, third one, I think at that point, say to me, oh my God, Jen, you had a neurotoxic reaction to Levaquin, and I don't know that these symptoms are ever going to go away. And I don't really know how to help you. But at least he was honest, and he showed me the black box warnings that nobody knew about. Even when I was presenting with the problems, they still didn't go back and check and help me work through that. So I'm the last person that's going to sit here and tell you that there aren't real things that can occur as a result of adverse reactions and withdrawal profiles. I've been through all of it. What I can tell you is that what I've also learned alongside that, and that's really what I want you to hear. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. It's not a black and white. It's not a either or. It's a this and. Okay. So what I learned, what I've learned about myself, is that first time that happened when I got floxed, I had all of those symptoms. But and I was getting gaslit like crazy. But I didn't know I was necessarily being fully gaslit because until that guy told me, look, there's all these black box warnings and we're so sorry. But by the way, and this goes back to the point I was trying to make in the last video, in the meantime, before I got to that wonderful man who finally pointed out to me what had happened, I had been worked up for MS, for chronic fatigue syndrome. At that point, there wasn't long-term COVID on the scene, so I was being worked up for all kinds of viruses, mold, Lyme, you name it. Maybe you need to go to this functional med and drop 30,000. Maybe you need to go do stem cell therapy. We don't know why, but something's, I don't know what the hell's the matter with you, but it can't be the antibiotic. Well, it was the antibiotic. The antibiotic created some sort of systemic disruption in my system. And, the difference is that as bad as I felt and as horrible as that was, I hadn't yet fully freaked myself out. I hadn't fully turned, it was as bad as anything I've ever been through, but I still wasn't spending hours on forums. I wasn't spending every single hour of every single day talking or thinking about it yet. I got there, but I wasn't doing it at that point. Now, years later, when I had a surgery and in the cocktail, I didn't know I had to probably think about what was in my anesthesia cocktail. Why? Because now I had a nervous system that I think was a little bit more of a tin can than a big fluffy bed. I was doing much better. I wasn't having any kind of acute symptoms, but I probably should have been a little more mindful. Would it have been lovely if the doctors had been? Sure, but they didn't know what the hell was going on and never really did. 3 years later, when I go in for the surgery and the whole thing blows up again, And then they start kind of chasing it with going back to, I don't know, your nervous system is a hot mess. Maybe it's, all these latent, brewing psychological issues that just never surfaced before you were 50 years old. And I knew better, thank God, being a therapist, but we started chasing the symptoms with things like gabapentin and Xanax, and I got progressively worse. The difference was at this point, and then they began to put me on high doses of different supplements and all kinds of things, and I would get better, and then I'd get worse, and I'd get better, and I'd get worse, and the battle fatigue of that wore me down. And then at one point, I basically just became so terrified of the noise in my head, the noise in my body, the scary thoughts, the feeling like I'm just never going to get better, just feeling of like that hitting that precipice of insanity, along with just all kinds of really debilitating physical symptoms like skin burning was terrible, neuropathies were terrible, restless legs at night where I just couldn't sit still. But I went inward. I started spending 5, 6, 7 hours on benzo buddies. That began to be my life. And while I was learning a ton, I was also going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that I get it. I've been there. I still deal with the vestiges of this every day. And I may, on some level, for the rest of my life. I don't know. Do I believe we heal? I do. I'm healing as we go. I know that I am. Do I believe that once we've, kind of gotten burned and our nervous system is now in this dysfunction and this dysregulation, that we feel things on a much more, we're much more sensitive to things? Absolutely. For example, let's just say vitamin D. I don't know, I'm low on vitamin D. Maybe at another time in my life before all this happened, I would have been able to take a vitamin D supplement. Maybe I would have felt something, maybe I wouldn't, but I probably would have been like, oh, well. Now what I feel is very exaggerated. What I feel is very intense. And I turn inward and I spend hours researching vitamin D and benzos and being floxed. And the next thing I know, I've lost 10 days of my life and I'm terrified again, right? So I get it, that these real things are occurring. But to the people that have written out and said, well, I have CFS and I have MS and I have long-term COVID and there's inflammation markers, I get it. That's why I tell people, go get things checked out. However, for example, let's just take long-term COVID, right? Or let's take MCAS. When you start looking at MCAS, multiple chemical sensitivities, right? Okay. One of the things that they're noticing and they're finding are very successful in helping people who've now left their homes and are only eating one food is DNRS, or the GUPTA program. Okay, what are these? These are neural retraining programs. What is neural retraining? Basically, let's begin to introduce these things that you've become terrified of in a very slow, methodical way while we're simultaneously changing the narrative. When you do these programs, you're not allowed to talk about your symptoms. You're not allowed to talk about them. You're not allowed to call for reassurance. Now, some people like these things, some people don't. Some people find benefit from them, some people don't. But when you look at what is getting people better in terms of the world of, let's just say, food sensitivities and chemical sensitivities, why are people responding sometimes very well to these kinds of programs? Because they're flipping the narrative. Okay, doesn't mean it's not real. Okay, having nervous system dysfunction that then presents and mimics so many different things. So when I talk about putting it all in the same bucket, go get the workup. If you have something going on that another type of medication or another type of approach is going to help you, then by all means do that thing. But if you've walked away with a condition where they're like, I don't really know. I mean, clearly your nervous system's involved here, but I don't know what to do about it other than throw a bunch of medicine at you, and then you take that medicine and you get worse. So maybe you take that medicine and you get better. Great. You're never going to hear me say not to do that. Why would I say that? But what I would say is if you've had the workup and Now you're dealing with long-term chronic issues. You're dealing with long-term chronic nervous system problems. Alongside those symptoms, you still have to, or we still have to answer the question, now what? We can stay stuck in the why. But now it flips over to now what? And this is where I go into that acronym of DEAL, decide, evoke your non-engagement response, allow it, and live your life as best you can. And again, I'm not trying to say that people that are going through benzo withdrawal or coming off an AD or coming off an antipsychotic or people who are floxed are dealing with necessarily the exact same thing that somebody who has chronic anxiety and agoraphobia is dealing with. I'm sure there are differences, okay? But in terms of the limbic system, in terms of the retraining, the finding new neural pathways, okay, I've been focused on this pain for years. Is there a way alongside this pain that I can begin to build some sort of life alongside this? Okay, so, again, I want you to take from this what works, and it's not going to resonate with everybody. It's not going to be relevant for everybody. I can speak to my experience, and I can speak to the experience of probably now hundreds and hundreds of people I've talked to over the years. And I can also speak from having an experience of being so acute I never left my room at one point for months, barely left the bed, to now, living a full life. And the reason why I say that is because one of the things for me that I had to work on is I'm going to have these symptoms. For how long, I don't know. Will they wax and wane with severity? Possibly. But how do I begin to work to where the symptoms don't have me? How do I do that? Sorry if you're hearing my phone ring. Sorry about that. So how do we, that's the question that I'm trying to answer. And that's the question that I'm trying to speak to. I do believe that there's neurodysregulation and neurodysfunction that's caused by benzos, caused by the fluoroquinolones. Again, these are real diagnoses in and of themselves, alongside all of these other things, whether it's POTS or CFS or MS or long-term COVID or, again, whatever, mold, Lyme, whatever. Sorry, I'm clearing my throat. But I wanted to come back and speak to this because, again, it's not about, believe me, the last thing I would want to do is gaslight you guys. But that said, regardless of what you're working with, once you've gotten things ruled out, if you are dealing with a nervous system issue, right, then we can begin to work on these different shifts in mindset and skill set to begin to approach our symptoms in our lives in a little bit of a different way. The why matters. I'm going to be advocating against fluoroquinolones for the rest of my life. I'm going to be advocating for informed consent on benzodiazepines for the rest of my life. And alongside that, I also had to and have to deal with the now what of my own situation with this. I can keep looking back and being like, this shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened. I should never have been given a Levaquin for a mild cold. This never would have happened had I not been given that. Yeah, that's true. That's probably true. I know it's true. I shouldn't have been, placed on benzos and told I could be on them for years to help with this nervous system problem that developed from the fluoroquinolone. Yeah, that was completely bullshit, right? And I spent a lot of time stuck there. Well, now I can advocate for those things while I'm simultaneously doing anything and everything I can in my power to look at what can I change. That's why I always go back to stoicism. What is within my control and what is not within my control? It is not in my control that these things happen to me. It may not be fully in my control to be able to shift the narrative in the medical community to get them to be able to admit that these things are real and they're happening. The World Health Organization seems to think they are. The FDA seems to think they are with the fluoroquinolones. Why is this not trickling down to our doctors? I don't know. I can advocate for people to be their own best advocate of themselves in the medical system or have people around them. Look up the FDA black box warnings. Look up the literature. Look around. See what's going on. People having a hard time coming off gabapentin. This is a real thing. So again, I'm the last person that's going to say, oh, you know what? It's all in your head. No, it was never all in my head. It's not in your head. For me, it was in my nerves. Because my nerves run my entire body, I was met with a ton of different problems. And I may, for the rest of my life, I don't know. I may, for the rest of my life, have to be a little bit more careful. My nervous system forever, I don't know, might operate a little bit more like a tin can than a big fluffy bed as it receives hormones and hormone changes and medications and stress and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm going to have to see. But what I do know is in my control is that sitting in bed, being scared to death, and operating from that mindset and letting that mindset dictate every thought, every feeling, every action, every behavior I took did not make me better. Now, if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. Again, with any kind of nervous system, any kind of injury of any kind, right? Like if I broke my leg and you broke your leg and we lined up 100 people in the world that broke their legs, you're going to have some people where, it was just a slight little break, pretty clean break, pretty easily fixed. Then you're going to have people that have compound fractures that, have to be, in traction and in months and months of physical therapy. Still a broken leg. It's the same thing with nervous system dysfunction. Okay? That's why I'm saying what brought you to the ball. You have to still kind of decide for yourself. And the severity and the duration is going to widely vary. It doesn't change what the problem is. And it varies widely, just like a broken leg does, just like a cold. You can have a whole family that's down with the flu, and some people can't get out of the bed, and some people are the ones making the soup while they're sniffling and not feeling so good. It's the same thing here. The severity and duration can widely fluctuate from person to person, and even in the disorder itself, even in the dysfunction itself, it can widely fluctuate. So I wanted to just come on and clarify, and I think what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do it just yet, but I've had a few comments come through that I've had to kind of take down because now I'm having people write and saying I can't even look at these videos because the comments are so terrifying, which is not the goal of having these videos up to scare people. I do make myself available to try to answer questions or to try to respond if I can. But again, I'm able to kind of speak in more generalities, and I'm able to speak to my experience, and I'm able to speak to the patterns I'm finding in the people that I'm speaking to and have been speaking to over the last many years. And you'll also hear me draw a lot from the world of disordered anxiety and nervous system sensitization. That's Claire Weeks, right? That's you'll hear me talk about Drew Linsalata and Josh Fletcher and Jenna Overbaugh about OCD. And I look at all of these places, Paige Pradko, I look at all these people in all these places because they're also dealing with another form of this and really focused on the mindset and the shifts, okay? Anyway, I hope this was helpful, guys. I want to make this wanted to come back and try to clarify. And we'll talk soon. Thanks.